Each year in mid-July, Rouffach organizes a light-hearted family day known as the Witches' Fete.
That's my grandmother, and she's waiting for you to give her a kiss.
Kiss me, dearie, kiss me.
Witches are no different to other women. They're absolutely normal, apart from the fact that they don't meet the approval of the people around them.
Why?
Because they're wise, because they're healers.
Witches are often more interesting and more intelligent than other women, and so they're considered to be different.
In olden days, they were the guardians, the keepers of the springs and the different potions that were used for healing, which modern medicine just adores.
Avec ceci, je vais t'enlever quelques belles parties charnues. À vous!
The Witches' Fete lasts for only one day, but is prepared several weeks in advance. It's one of Alsace's most recent festivals. It was thought up 10 years ago by a local shopkeeper, Maurice Sur, and several of his friends.
10 years ago, I was president of the Chamber of Commerce and president of the Tourism Committee, and I decided I'd like to set up an event that everybody could enjoy and that was different from the wine festivals. I wanted to find a spectacular event that would not only help boost tourism and local commerce, but that would also promote Rouffach and make good use of the splendid square in front of the town church.
How high are you going with that?
We're taking it up as high as possible. It's for the floodlights. That's what the president asked for, and that's what we're doing.
We're only a short distance from the Witches' Tower. That's the famous tower on the city wall in which the witches were locked after their Sabbath meeting. The Witches' Sabbath was held on Bolenberg Hill, which is about 3 kilometers from here. The women presumed to be witches were brought to Rouffach to be tried and then either tortured over there in the Rue des Bouchers, which we call the Street of Horrors, or sent to the Witches' Tower, where they were locked away until they were either tortured or burnt at the stake.
Allez, Maurice! Laisse-les tirer, hop! Attention les tuiles. Hop, 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 hop! Hop! Non! Changer de case, là! Attends, attends. Stop! Je peux pas monter là-dessus. Hein? Attends. Hop, voilà. C'est bien. Voilà. Ah, putain. C'est bon! C'est bon! Hein? On avait parlé d'une type de roulette. Hein?
Every year, 300 of Rouffach's 4,600 inhabitants help prepare the fete. There's a great deal to be organized, and everyone does their best to make sure the day will be a huge success.
It's a big day. It's really good publicity for the town, the shopkeepers, the wine growers, good for everybody, in fact. It gets people talking about us way beyond the region. Initially, it was only meant for our own amusement, but now it brings in a lot of business.
Overlooking Rouffach, the Bolenberg Hill is still a rich source of witches' tales. As is often the case, they're partly legend, partly true. Guy and Céline are fascinated by these stories.
Up there, you're away from the noisy traffic, and you hardly ever see a car. It's another world, and you know you're in a place where once the witches came to hold their Sabbaths. It's great to go up there, find a nice little spot overlooking the plain, and then just let your imagination wander. There's nothing but little birds up there, and when you get up to the top, there's a great view of the plain. Apparently, the witches came here to hold their Sabbaths. Why here? Perhaps because they needed an open stretch of ground to land on when they flew in on their broomsticks. And then you can't help thinking about these poor, decent women who were burnt at the stake for nothing. You can imagine the women who used to come here to tend their crops and their vines. On their way home, they sometimes stopped at the side of the road to gather a few plants. But if they were seen, people said they were using the plants to make love potions or some sort of concoction to transform them into witches. And when one of these women was denounced, she'd end up being tried and executed. It makes you wonder how many women were put to death, and for what?
For no reason at all.
The worst is that it was because of the church.
You think so?
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
But why?
Why? Well, among other things, the church had to justify its existence. In a village like this, when a baby was born with some sort of disfigurement, people said it was conceived with the devil, with Satan.
Alors imagine, ça venait déjà ça a été conçu avec le diable, avec Satan. Ça pouvait pas être.
They said it was due to unnatural causes, and that the mother had a tryst with the devil at one of these Sabbaths.
And there's a little story, a legend, involving the trees, isn't there?
Well, they say that they're twisted like that because the witches held their Sabbaths among the trees up there. As you can see, all of them are contorted and tortured looking. That one's been struck by lightning several times. It looks as though they've been replanted more than once. It's the wind that twists them, and you can't stop the wind from blowing. Lots of them have been blown down.
There's very little protection, so what with the wind and the lightning, it's not impossible.
It's a high point up there, so the lightning would have caused a lot of damage.
They said it was the witches that did that?
During their Sabbaths, all sorts of things have an impact on nature. All they did was make a fire and dance around it, apparently. I don't know, though. I wasn't there at the time.
Where, the Sabbath?
Yes, the Sabbath.
Weren't you invited?
No, I never received an invitation.
Can somebody bring some screws? I've run out.
I think the box is behind you.
It's said that the presumed witches of Rouffach were tortured in the Rue des Bouchers. This little street is now the site of the festival's major attraction, created by a group of the town's teenagers.
This is the Street of Horrors, and it attracts hundreds of visitors during the fête. It's for people who enjoy a bit of a scare. There's Jeremy. He's one of the many young people who's helping us. This is often the first time they've done this sort of work. There are 43 volunteers working on the street. There's also 3 artisans who join us when they've finished work. Apart from them, we're all voluntary workers. This is a sort of market where we'll have a bunch of robbers and brigands trying to sell the visitors their loot, things like rings, still attached to a severed finger. It can get quite gruesome, in fact. Very, very gruesome. There's lots of mystery and spooky stuff, and yes, there's plenty of blood. These are wolf traps. They were once used for hunting, but now totally banned. These are antique clamps, perfect for crushing heads. Here we have a few pincers of different sizes, great for extracting teeth, and this is an old harrow, nothing better to impale somebody with. A Thai massage, Gothic style. Its points are extremely sharp and highly dangerous.
Further along the vineyard route, some 20 kilometers to the north of Rouffach, is Bergheim, that also has a tower on its ramparts, in which the women presumed to be witches were jailed. Julia Brendel is the tourist guide.
In Bergheim, between 1582 and 1683, 40 women were burnt at the stake. At that time, the town was in the grip of an economic crisis. Everyone in Alsace feared the plague, and a number of women were accused of causing it. They were subjected to interrogation and torture, and forced to confess to something they hadn't done. In most cases, it was a pretext to settle scores against women who weren't approved of. If a neighboring farm had a better crop than yours, it was quite a simple matter to accuse the farmer's wife of practicing witchcraft. And it was a foregone conclusion that the so-called witch would be burnt at the stake. But it had to be done in accordance with the rule book. So there was always a preliminary trial. Once tried and condemned, the women were led off to be burnt at the stake located just outside the village.
In memory of the 40 women who were strangled, beheaded, or burnt to death during the 16th and 17th century, Bergheim set up a museum of witchcraft. Historian Jean-Michel Belair is one of France's witchcraft specialists.
There was no such thing as a witch. There was only a belief in witchcraft. So I think that these stories should be demythicized a little. And by that I mean an attempt must be made to find out what was behind them. In reality, witches never existed, but the stories surrounding witchcraft give us an extraordinary insight into the mentality of the period. Winged horses flying across the sky, chariots of fire to get to the site of the Sabbath, and of course, the well-known broomstick, on which the witches rode to their rendezvous with the devil. They were always nothing but fairy tales. In most cases, it involved a family quarrel that was appeased by accusing a person of witchcraft, the most serious felony of all at the time. And it's interesting to note that during a certain period, the church wanted to put an end to the persecution of witches. But it was a bit like a pyromaniac who's unable to put out the fire once it's started. I think that generally speaking, the clergy went along with the prevailing repression and persecution.
Over the course of 1 century, 20,000 men, women and children were burnt at the stake in Alsace and Germany, a dark page in Europe's history that has long been covered up.
A small 15th century chateau, a few ruins.
We're back again in the atmosphere of the Middle Ages. Gothic.
Goes nicely with the costumes.
Yes.
Since childhood, Magali Becard has been fascinated by the history of witchcraft. As a clothes designer, she draws her inspiration from the costumes of the period.
I tried to create what I was unable to find in the clothing stores. Lots of lace, off-the-shoulder tops, flared sleeves. I was inspired by everything Gothic and medieval, and I was interested in the colors I couldn't find. So I looked for fabrics that I liked and started designing. Turn around. This is the first piece I designed. It was made from red velvet and various other materials that I picked up. This material was part of an old dressing gown that I cut up and refashioned into black and red panels. Then I worked with laces, especially here at the sleeves, which are adjustable. Put your hands through. There you go. A few finishing touches that I call beading, and which is also a medieval style. So, this was my very first. When I started, I realized that I had a certain aptitude, a gift, you might say. I continued learning on my own, and it was really quite easy for me. At first, I was fairly satisfied with what I did, so I started to put on little shows. As a result, I made quite a few contacts, and I started working for opera singers, theater, festival costumes, and that sort of thing. There's now a new fashion emerging, the Gothic Fashion, which is often linked with Satanism or sadomasochism. But it's not that at all. What I'm trying to do is more Gothic romanticism, spiritual Gothic, if you like. It's really quite beautiful, and it's not at all as sinister as people tend to think.
Voilà, nickel.
As far as I'm concerned, a witch was somebody on the fringe of society, somebody who was different to others. When you didn't conform, you were called a witch. If I'd lived in those times, perhaps I'd have been sent to the stake because, although I'm not particularly different to others, I have my own style and personality. Today we're lucky enough to be able to be ourselves. In those days, everybody had to be the same as everybody else. Everybody knew what their neighbors were up to and so on. Fortunately, these days we can be different without risking being burnt at the stake.
Back to Rouffach, a few hours before the start of the fete. In the Street of Horrors, everything's in place.
That's the entry to the torture chamber. It's a reproduction of the entrance to the old tower. Yokes like this one were placed around the necks of thieves and wrongdoers, and then they were paraded around the town. The hands were placed on either side, here and here, and their heads in the middle. This lock made sure they were unable to get out of it, and it's extremely heavy. We tried to reproduce a torture rack of the period with the few resources we had available. The victims were chained up on it. Then they were drawn and quartered, and that was the end of them. Okay, that's fine. The one in the tower's working.
I'd like us all to drink to the health of this year's fete. And let's hope that everything goes well. And that everyone does what they have to do to ensure its success. Here's to the Witches' Fete.
Ah, good day to you. What's happening today? I saw lots of people here and I came out. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I'm going to buy you a broomstick.
Anyone who is seen in the town of Rouffach, a woman who goes by the name of Bertha of Boisilier, is requested to inform the guards.
Let me go. I've done nothing wrong. Let me go.
Shut your
Just
mouth.
stay still. Follow us.
Mr. Prosecutor,
You have been denounced for having practiced illegal acts of abortion.
No, it's a lie.
You have been reported to have been making love potions
And what if I did?
and also poisons. You shall be shut away in the Rouffach Witches' Tower to await trial by the Holy Church.
No.
Guard, take her away.
No.
the verdict has been pronounced.
No, not the witch's tower. I'm not a witch.
With an average 7,000 visitors for the event, it's an obvious heyday for the restaurants. Quite a few of them even adapt regional dishes to the festival theme. In Bernard Schreiber's restaurant, the traditional Alsatian sauerkraut becomes witches' sauerkraut.
For the dish, I sauté a small palette of smoked pork and some larding bacon. I've also prepared a Montbéliard sausage to complete the garnishing. Then we add a few spatzels, Alsatian noodle dumplings, and a small quantity of white wine. Then I press the cabbage to remove the excess liquid. There we go. The sausages are heating up nicely, they look perfect. And we put all that into the dish. Sophie, can you pass me a plate for this? The customer's going to really enjoy this. Witches' sauerkraut. I'll just top the lot with these knackwursts. Gives it a nice touch, a bit witch-like. There we go. It's for table number 8.
It's 10 o'clock, and time for a few thrills. The Street of Horrors is about to open.
Don't touch us!
There are people imprisoned here! Where are the prisoners?
There's no need to be frightened. You've just got to make your way through.
I'm scared. It's awful. Nicholas, I'm scared. Let's get out.
Towards midnight, the fete comes to an end with a symbolic execution by fire. One way, no doubt, to exorcise the fate of thousands of women burnt at the stake in the region 400 years ago.